So we are in the third session of our important journey studying Ambedkar economics. And so far we have had two sessions. The first session was devoted to understanding the way Babasaheb Ambedkar has sketched the economic history of India. And the second session was devoted to the larger macroeconomics that Babasaheb Ambedkar has talked about in his monumental thesis work. And today we will be discussing about a very important aspect of Babasaheb Ambedkar's economic thoughts, and that is about the money or about the currency. And to my mind, what Babasaheb Ambedkar has left behind in terms of what is known today as monetary economics is very amazing. And I personally found this exploration very interesting, very educating. And I'm sure that those of you who would engage with his ideas about the monetary policies will find it very thrilling and interesting. So let's begin with a presentation. So as we know that Babasaheb Ambedkar had studied a lot of courses when he was studying in the Columbia University and in the history and political science and sociology. And when it came to the economics, he has dwelt deeply on several aspects of the economics. And one of the aspects he went very deeper, that is the aspect of monetary economics. It's about money, all about money. Though he was very much trained into several disciplines of the modern economics, it's very interesting to me that he has said made this statement in front of the Royal Commission on Indian Currency on Finance on 15 December 1925. That time he was very young man. He has just written his PhD thesis in the London School of Economics. And the book was so well received by several quarters that when he gave an evidence before this Royal Commission on Indian Currency on Finance on 15 December 1925, which was also known as the Hilton Young Commission. And if we look at the proceedings of that commission and the way Babasaheb Ambedkar testified, it's a very interesting document, which I think each of you should read it. Just the beauty of Babasaheb's, style of presenting the facts, presenting the theory, presenting the reality, and the way young Babasaheb Ambedkar is communicating. It's in 1925, well before he became the all India leader of the scheduled caste communities. He was known in the wider circle as an economist par excellence. That's why the Hilton Young Commission took a lot of efforts to get his testimony, and his testimony is very interesting. And in that testimony, at one point, he says, "I, being a member of laboring community, feel that falling prices are better." So he says that the inflation or rise in the exchange of the currency is never going to benefit the laboring communities. And he claims himself to be the member of the laboring community. And I find this very interesting because Baba Saheb's economics was always directed at the interest of the larger class of the people, the larger citizenry of the country. His interest was not partisan, his interest was not lopsided. He wanted to benefit all. And we can see, even if he's talking about the monetary economics, he's talking about the monetary policies, he's going deep into the history of Indian currency. His point is very simple. He wants to educate the general masses. That's what he says. He wants to awaken the general masses of India so that they can begin to understand. So I personally found this statement very interesting. It comes in a discussion with the Royal Commission on Indian Currency. So I thought that I should begin with that. And in an article he wrote that time in the Servant of India, he used to write articles for the magazines, and they were very interesting small articles that he produced. And in one of his articles, it says the present organization of the society, when we look at in terms of the economics, there are investing classes, there is a business class, and there is earning class. Earning class is, of course, a laboring class. And the business class is center of all economic activities. On one hand, it borrows money from the investing class. On the other, it employs the earning class. There are money contracts, agreements to pay so much money to such a party, such and such party. And the expansion and the contraction in the value of money affects the various classes differently. And that's the point that Babasaheb Ambedkar makes. And it's a general point that he makes all the time, is that stability of the value of money is important. Now, why I think this is important today? Because when we think about the monetary economics, it's now become very technical field. And the human face is totally absent because people deal with the numbers, they deal with abstract formulas. And in that abstraction, there is a danger of losing the human face of economics. And that's why I find it very interesting when Babasaheb Ambedkar claims that he represents the interest of the majority of the dispossessed people, disadvantaged people, disenfranchised people. And that's what happened when the monetary economy becomes very abstract. So I found this classification in terms of the three classes very interesting. And we can figure out, in terms of the Indian social stratification, as to which caste or class falls into these three categories. So let's begin the real stuff. So what is a monetary economics? As if you dwell deep into Babasaheb's ideas and the way he has contributed to the field of monetary economics, the way he has testified, the way he has researched into the monetary economy of India, we can begin to see how brilliant a monetary economist he was. So let's begin with the concept of monetary economics. What is monetary economics? Monetary economics is, of course, a branch of economics that focuses on the role of money and financial systems in the economy. It examines how money supply, interest rate, and monetary policy affect economic activities such as inflation, employment, and overall economic growth. So that's, in a way, is the definition of monetary economics. And we see how Babasaheb Ambedkar deeply analyzes all of these in his monumental work, The Problem of Rupee, which he republished in 1947 as The History of Indian Currency and Banking. And that was the volume first. He wanted to go for the volume two, and he wanted to produce the analysis post his thesis, but he didn't have time, so he couldn't do that. But he had certainly had well-developed ideas about the monetary economics even after, when India was, moving towards the transfer of power in 1947. He has definite ideas. And publishing that work in 1947 itself shows that Babasaheb Ambedkar was very keen to see that his thoughts on economics become relevant to the new nation that was, taking birth. So Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar is a pioneer in the field of Indian monetary economics. And we can say that he brought institutional changes in the Indian monetary system. Because this Hilton Young Commission laid to latter the foundation of RBI, a very important sort of an administrative system, which was focused on the monetary economics. So let's look at what Babasaheb Ambedkar talks about money, says about money. Babasaheb Ambedkar says, sound system of money, field of monetary economics today, is essential for automatic adjustments, like the demand and supply side of the things, invisible hand, in the great give and take trading of specialized industry production. So I put the words in the parentheses. The original words are outside the parentheses, but if you read it carefully, sound system of money is essential for automatic adjustments in the great give and take of specialized industry. So in a way that captures the very basic definition of what economy is, and that to what monetary economics is all about. So we need a solid system of money. It's imperative to have a solid, sound system of money. for the economy to really grow up. And Babasaheb Ambedkar says that a currency is something like any commodity. He doesn't distinguish a commodity, money, from any commodity. He says which maintains its value simply because of the law of supply and demand. The great law, how the how the prices are stabilized with this law of supply and law of demand. So he says that the same law of supply and demand is applicable to the currency itself. So it is not different from any other commodity. So that is the monetary economics in a nutshell, and that's how Babasaheb Ambedkar has defined the monetary economics and defined the rupee or currency. Some key concepts in Babasaheb's writings is this, that the system of currency should be naive-proof and foolproof. These are very interesting points, because it should not be just naive-proof, but it should be rational, it should be thought through. And Babasaheb Ambedkar says that the currency itself is the standard. You don't need other standard to measure what the currency is all about. Currency itself is 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 an aspect of a standard. And he says that stability and elasticity of currency must be maintained. So when I say currency, you can replace it with dollar, rupee, or any other currency. So for the sake of clarifying the concept, we are using the word currency. Currency is the standard. Stability and elasticity of currency must be maintained. A reserve maintains itself when the currency is limited. It does not maintain the currency. When the prices are high, the business class gains and laboring class loses. You see, these pithy aphorisms that we find in Babasaheb's analysis of economics, they are very important. And at one point of time, he goes on showing how the rise in the prices or exchange rate affects the laboring classes more than any class in that country. I put this small aphorism here because sometimes we do not know what is the profit, and Babasaheb Ambedkar says that a profit is a surplus income. So anywhere, if you get a surplus income, you can count it as a profit. And this is a very interesting concept. When you unpack these concepts, when you analyze these concepts, when you detail out or flesh out these concepts or the aphorisms, you can begin to see a lot of interesting ideas coming up. And this is a very remarkable statement of Babasaheb Ambedkar. Deceased money is worse than want of money. So there are some Ambedkar principles of good money that I try to enumerate here. Society should definitely have money. A trading society must have money. Without that, it cannot create the specialized product, because the barter system has a limiting tendency, because it won't lead to the new products. If there is a barter system, if there is no common currency, if there is only barter system, there is no scope for innovation. That's why a trading society or society must have money, and it must be good money. It should not be a bad money. It should not be a speculative money. It should be a good money. And evolving good money is essential for economy. Stability of value is one of the prime requisites of a good currency system. So what is the value? It's not something, that is speculative. The exact value. If we know this word in the investing, we know in value investing. We have to know the exact value of it, not the speculative value of it, or not the inflated value of something. It should have the stability of value, is one of the prime requisites of a good currency system. The seasonal swings affected the value of money. In some seasons, the demand of the money is high, and then the supply should be high. If the demand of money is less, the supply should be less. So these are very interesting concept, because that's how you begin to understand the monetary economics as a dynamic field where these all principles of Babasaheb's good money are applicable even today. And rhythm in the social demand of the money, as I said, that the demand of the money changes from time to time. During the festival, you need to have a lot of money in the market. During the farming season, you need to have a lot of money in the market. So the another aspect of Ambedkar principles, the supply should be regulated according to the variation in the demand for it. The purchasing medium of any commercially advanced country is always a compound of money and credit. So it's not just about money. There has to be a credible credit system, without which the commercially advanced country cannot exist. So banking is very important. The banking system is very important. We know that the monetary policies are directly linked with the banking system. And in the beginning, when the monetary economics was taking shape in the country, in India, the check system was totally absent, because the checks have to be issued in English, and many of the Indians were illiterate, and the encashment of the check was itself a very difficult process that time, and it led to a lot of big problems in advancing or creating the loans. And therefore, the absence of check system also says that there has to be system like check system. And if the money is not stable, then the business risks are high, because you never know how the money is going to go up or down, and your calculations can be completely turned upside down. And the India was had the silver standard, and England had gold standard. So their currency was based on gold, and Indian currency was based on silver. I'm going to come to that. It's very interesting. As we go further in this session today, it's going to become more and more interesting. So you see, this is Boss Ambedkar said that there has to be a common principle, the common standard for both the countries. And the another aspects of Ambedkar principles, money is not how much gold that the money is worth, gold reserve, because there was a concept of the gold reserve that all the money should be backed by the gold. Boss Ambedkar says that it's not about the gold reserve, but how much of things in general, of which gold is an infinitesimal part, that it is worth. So you see, the volume of the commodities in the country is far higher than the quantity of the gold. So the gold reserve cannot determine the volume of the money. The volume of the money, the quality of the money is determined by the range of the commodities. And then we know that in the history of monetary economics came various indices through which the worth of the money was calculated. So it's a basket of the commodities, or certain indices that lead to the understanding of what the money is worth for. And everywhere, therefore, the attempt is to keep money stable in terms of commodities in general, and that is the proper for what minister to the welfare of people is not so much the precious metals as commodities and services of more direct utility. So more than gold reserve, what is important is that the money or the currency should be backed by the commodities in general. And we know that now even the commodity is not the base of the money or currency. There are many abstract principles which determine what money is worth of. So let's go further. As we know that Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar had this very important, interesting point that the stabilization of rupee is more important. Stability is very important. And he was advocating for the stability in the rupee. And he showed how the currency fluctuation affects the economy, and how it affects the trade and livelihood. So you can read by yourself. The very interesting discussion. So monetary economics covers the following areas, as I briefly pointed out to you: the money supply, central banking, interest rate, inflation, and monetary policy is now about the strategies as to how to control the inflation, maximize the employment, and stabilize the currency. These are the three domains of monetary policies. And now the behavioral economics has taken a step ahead, and now the people's expectations have to be factored in the future economic conditions to calculate the conditions like inflation rate that can take into account the behavior, the investment pattern, and consumption among the larger communities. So we can say that monetary economics provides the theoretical foundation for understanding how money impacts economic performance and informs policymakers regarding effective monetary interventions in the economy. So let's come to the very interesting part of the presentation today. History of Indian currency. As we know that Babasaheb Ambedkar had a very unique sort of bend of mind. He went deep into the history, and not only that he went deeply into the history, but he used the history to develop an analytical understanding of it. So history and analysis goes hand in hand in Babasaheb's scheme of thinking, and that's very important. So he has given, as you know, a very beautiful summary of the history of Indian currency, and from ancient India to modern India, coinage in the ancient India, coinage in the medieval India, money market at the time of Akbar, single currency market, multiple currencies after the fall of Mughal Empire, confusion of currencies in the initial days of the East India Company, and development of modern money market in India, and now digital currency. So digital currency was not, of course, there. I added it, but I'm sure Baba Ambedkar would have definite ideas about what to do about this abstracted aspect of the money, what it is known today as financialization in the economics. So let's not dwell deeply into that, the last part of it. So ancient India, we of course know that at the time of the Buddha there was a monetary system. As empires such as Maurya and Guptas flourished, standardized coins emerged, the gold dinar and silver drachms became widely used. These coins were not only a medium of exchange, but also a way to signify royal authority. So you see, if you study the archaeology of India, you find a lot of coins all over the places, and they signify the royal authority. At the same time, they signify that there was money market. There was currency was in the currency, we can say. So let's go ahead. When it came to Mughal Empire and South India, gold currency was there, silver coins were there, and copper coins were there. And according to Babasaheb Ambedkar, the Mughal Empire, particularly at the time of Akbar, economically, India was an advanced country. That is north part of it. The south part was controlled by the southern kings. Large trade and well-developed banking institutions. That's what Babasaheb Ambedkar says. And he says that credit played an appreciable part in her transactions. Well-developed medium of exchange, monetary system, and common standard of value, common currency. So at the time of Akbar, there was a common currency and a well-developed medium of exchange, and there were two types of money that time. So one was gold, which was known as mohar. So we know these words all the time. Gold coin was called the mohar, and the silver coin was called rupee, and that's where the word comes from today, the rupaya, because India had the British enacted the single metal currency based on the rupee, based on the silver, and it was known as rupee. Just like dollar was at some point of time based on silver, and the silver is called thaler in Germany, and thaler becomes dollar. So these both coins, which were issued by the Mughal Empire, the mohar and rupee, they were both identical in the weight. So they were 175 GRS Troy. These are the measurement of the purity of metal used in the coin. So both the coins were identical in weight. And Baba Ambedkar goes deeply into explaining us the various concepts there. And that time the weight was very important. So the coins were used for weighing also. And that's why if you change the weight, the whole system of measurement changes. So very interesting discussion that Baba Ambedkar had in this problem of rupee. So mohar and rupee were the common measure of value, but there was no fixed ratio of exchange between them. So you didn't know how they are in terms of the ratio of exchange between them, the mohar and the rupee. So Baba Ambedkar says that more than a double standard, it was a parallel standard. So there was, you can say, the monetary economics based on the mohar or the gold coins, and there was a monetary system based on the rupee or the silver coin, and it was a parallel standard, not a double standard. So the third coin, dam, and I'm sure some of you might have heard this word dam, was a copper coin, created a fixed ratio between gold and silver. So there was, it's like a triangulation. The third coin, the dam, and then we know chadam and all those words. So the third coin determined the ratio between the gold and the silver. So that's about the North India. In South India, there was a gold coin currency only, which was known as pagoda. If any of you have seen this movie Thangalan, you will see the reference to pagodas. So, the pagoda was a gold coin of the ancient time in South India. It went all the way up to medieval time. The right of coinage or coining the money or minting the coins was a very important right. And in the Mughal Empire, the right of coinage was held by the emperor as inter jura magistrate. So it's the power of their royalty that they can only issue the coin. Nobody else can issue the coin. And once when and I think during the time of Aurangzeb, the East India Company issued certain coins. Aurangzeb called them impure coins. So the right of coinage was held by the emperor as inter jura majestatis. The right of coinage was exercised with responsibility. So they were not irresponsible rulers. They exercised the right of coinage with responsibility. The coin adhered to the standard way all over the empire, because that's how you measured various things. So the coin, the weight of the coin, even in the recent period, the coin was used as a weighing sort of a entity. So after the fall of Mughal Empire, what happened? There was a bazaar of coins. So many coins issued by so many kings, and there was a big confusion. Many kingdoms coined their own money, right to coinage as an insignia of the royal sovereignty. If I want to show that I'm a powerful king, I would issue the coin in my name. Bewildering media of exchange, such a confusion that Babasaheb Ambedkar described, because there were so many coins in so many different kingdoms, in so many different districts were circulated, that it becomes the bewildering media of exchange. So if there are so many medias of exchange, there is the exchange becomes very difficult. Nay, it becomes very impossible to exchange because there is no single common media of exchange. And the money was debased at the time of the Mughal Empire, the money was not debased because it was backed by the powerful kings. And due to the debasement of money, the primary quality of general and ready acceptability was lost. Bullion content became more important than the value of the coins. So, what is the bullion content? Bullion is the metal content of a coin. Like the gold bullion, if you see in the treasuries, you will see the gold bullion. The gold is kept in terms of the bullion, the bars. So it's the exact metallic value of that before it's coined. And Babasaheb Ambedkar says that the bullion content became more important than the value of the coins. The coins became local tender, they didn't become the public tender or the universal tenders. Hence, the trade was reduced to barter due to the plurality of the medium of exchange. That was the condition of the fall of the Mughal Empire. So, a brief history of modern money in the modern times, as narrated by Babasaheb Ambedkar. Gold, silver coins, fluctuating prices of gold and silver, they affected it so much because the discovery of the gold or the discovery of silver will affect the total monetary system. And then there was a question of monometallism or bimetallism, whether there should be the coins of two metals or one metal. Then coining and mints, evolution of international money market, foreign exchange market, where the rates was fixed by the government. It was not then money, there was not international monetary, system was not well, there was a sign of international monetary system because the trade and commerce was taking place between the countries of the Europe. They used to meet together to decide on the several aspects. And the last point is how the sterling rupee rate was determined, how it affected India. It was always determined in a way that will affect the India. So East India Company, of course, imperial coinage from bimetallic to monometallic, as we have seen that at the time of after the fall of Mughal Empire, there's a confusion of currencies. And then when the East India India Company came, they resorted to what is called the monometallism. So India had the monometallism, silver coins, hence the name rupee. As I told you in the beginning, the new rupee of the gross weight 180 troy grains, out of which 15 alloy and 165 fine silver troy GRS. Weight was chosen to match with the earlier coins and as a measure of weight. This was done as the double standard could not be feasible, uniform currency, and the gold was demonetized. So the gold no longer became the money. The gold coins became irrelevant because the gold was demonetized. And we know, all of us know, that India was bound to make payments to England. So the great drain of wealth from India began with this exchange rates. So the change of administrative system called for the change in the monetary system because the administrative change was taking place in India. The larger parts were conquered by the East India Company. The whole system of administration was changing, and therefore it called for the change in the monetary system. And therefore, India saw the reforms in 1893. But nobody had studied much about the Indian currency during 1800 to 1893, almost 100 years. And it's a genius of Babasaheb Ambedkar. Let me tell you this. He has gone into the archives and he has read volumes after volumes after volumes, the dispatches, the letters, the commission reports. It's not easy to construct the history of the antiquity, and that's what Babasaheb Ambedkar has done. Read volumes after volumes. And then there is a story of gold exchange standard, then gold standard. I'm not going to go into that. And there was a discussion of managed currency or naturally automatic currency. And at some point of time in the history of the world, gold became the international form of money, and it became the basis of many currencies. But the India was still silver best. So the standard of value is very important. As I said, whether it's gold or silver or commodities, the value and the standard of value is very important. And as we know that during the time of the East India Company, the Indian economy was transferring from the kind economy to cash economy. So, in the medieval time, the economy was mostly kind economy. It was not the cash economy. So the payments were given in terms of the grains, food grains, or land grants, or whatever the payments were made like that in kind. And it was slowly moving towards the cash economy, and therefore India needed more cash to cater to the emerging need of the cash economy. And as we have seen, the British had gold coins, India had silver coins. And already there is, a confusion about the coins in the two intimately connected countries. Some countries had mixed coins. So all import of silver was coined and used for currency purposes. Little or nothing was left for the industrial and social consumption of people. So therefore, the rupee was melted and became non-monetary. So sometimes people needed the silver. So what they did, they just melted the rupee, and sometimes it became non-monetary. Very interesting points. More on Indian rupee. Silver-backed paper would make currency economical, convenient, and expansive. So what happened initially? There were no notes. There was no paper currency. But then, the cash economy was becoming large, and the coins couldn't sustain. There is a limit to the issue of metal, and the paper currency has no limits. You can just print the notes, and but it has to be, of course, backed by certain reserve, like the gold reserve in case of India, silver reserve, or commodity, market. And now there are many various instruments that back the money in the modern times. So you see, silver backed by paper would make currency economical, convenient, and expansive. Then there was an introduction of the government paper currency, and there were like silver coins, government securities, and notes in circulation at some point of time in India. But sometimes the denomination of the notes were so high that the common people couldn't use it, isn't it? So the denomination was like 10 rupees, and at that time 10 rupees was such a high in value that the poor people or the middle classes, they couldn't afford to have the notes because they were, the denomination was high. And then there was a discussion of lowering down the denominations and so on and so forth. The gold, of course, was used for the monetary purposes, but it was not a legal tender. But according to Babasaheb Ambedkar, gold should have been made standard values. Indian notes were comparable with sovereigns and half sovereigns minted in England and Australia. And there was, of course, question of who can issue coins, whether the mint should be open to all, or whether it's only the government's duty to issue the coins. And as this is the point, there was a free banking system in India where every bank could issue the notes. Very interesting. All the bank had the power to issue the notes at some point of time in the Indian history, but they could not compete with the presidency banks. With that, this Bombay presidency and Madras presidency and Bengal presidency, they had their banks, presidency bank. Who is going to compete with the national, these big banks? Though the banks had the power to issue their own notes. And in 1861, a national issue for the whole India was taken over by the Department of Paper Currency. So then in 1864, it was decided that no longer the power of issuing the notes will be given to the banks. It will be managed from the single source. There would be a Department of Paper Currency. And there were, of course, interest-bearing treasury notes, which were issued from time to time by the government. So I just want to quickly rush through it because these are something very important in current silver coins of the GOI. That's how the exchange was determined in standard silver bullion or foreign silver coins, notes payable to bearer on demand, gold coins of GOI or foreign gold, which was used as a standard for exchange, and the regulation of the volume of the paper currency to preserve its value by contracting and expanding in the same manner and to the extent as its metallic counterpart. So the issue of the paper currency was not, unregulated. It was linked to the metallic counterpart. However, the denomination of the notes, as I said, paper currency was high to penetrate into economic life of the people. Just too high to penetrate into the day-to-day life of the people because the denomination was very high and the notes were encashable only at the office of issue. That's another big problem because there was no universal encashability. So if you want to encash, you have to, if you want to receive the coins in the place of the notes, you have to go to that particular office which issued it. And they because there was no universal and today we think it's everything is smooth flowing, everything is so easy, but that was not the case at some point of time in the history. So this is what reforms Babasaheb Ambedkar suggested in the money market, and he written primarily for the Indian public. He says Professor Kenny's examines the scientific basis and favors exchange standard. According to Babasaheb Ambedkar, nothing will stabilize the rupee unless we stabilize the general purchasing power. And that's a very interesting insight because he's going totally counter to Professor Kenny's the big man in the field of monetary economics. Very big man. And it's the world owes it to Keynesian economy, this concept of deficit financing and so on and so forth, you know. And Babasaheb Ambedkar has gone after him. He said that Professor Keynes is wrong. And on many counts. And young Babasaheb Ambedkar is challenging Professor Keynes is something like a movie. And according to Babasaheb, nothing will stabilize the rupee unless we stabilize the general purchasing power. That means the internal trade, the economy should be strengthened so that the money rupee will be stabilized. It cannot be stabilized by the exchange standard. And I think that remains true to even today. Without a strong economy, you cannot have a strong currency. As we see the fluctuation in the rupee today, how it goes up and down with the international, upheavals, and because sometimes it represents the situation in the economy of the country itself. So stability of the rupee depends upon the stability of its general purchasing power. The exchange standard does not do so, and there has to be effective convertibility into gold because the gold was coming as a kind of an international standard of exchange. Even today, the gold reserve is kept by the various government like the like USA has a huge gold reserve in their treasury. India has very less gold reserve in its treasury. So when the dire situation comes into being and the value is lost, you exchange the gold, and that's what happened to India in 1991 before the liberalization. And the gold reserves are kept. China has a huge gold reserve, and India has very less gold reserve. So you see, if things become very, very unstable, you resort to the gold reserve. And we had resorted to the gold reserve in the point in the history of our country. Stability of rupee depends upon the stability of its general purchasing power. As I said, inconvertible rupee with a fixed limit of issue. That was Babasaheb Ambedkar's solution. It's a very interesting solution. It's a very deep solution. He says that there should be a fixed limit to the issue of the rupee and it should be inconvertible. That means he was talking about making domestic market very strong, the domestic economy very strong, not all the time depending on the external forces. And his solution was radical. You see his solution? He says, melt the rupees. So all the rupees, all the coins, just melt them, sell them as a bullion, as a metallic bullion, bars, and use the proceedings for revenue purposes and fill the void by an inconvertible paper. That was Babasaheb's solution. Very radical. It says it's a very radical solution. So he says he says close the mints for both the public and the government. That's what he says. How we can reform the the market, money market. Post-independence, 1947 onwards, the Reserve Bank of India. After India gained independence, 1947, the RBI continued to play a crucial role in shaping monetary policy and monetary system, focusing on economic growth and stability. Now we have a monetary policy framework. The post-independence period saw changes in the monetary policy framework, focusing on interventionist policies aimed at controlling inflation and promoting growth. This is all this is, if we don't understand the basic philosophy, the principles, this all becomes a whitewash. That's why Ambedkar's principles are so important. What is a good money? What is the stability of the value? It's still so valid. So, otherwise there is a danger of, losing ourselves in the jargons. And the economic liberalization of 1991, economic reforms in the early 1990s brought significant changes to India's monetary system. The introduction of market-oriented reforms led to the deregulation of interest rate and a shift towards more flexible exchange rate system. Now, the current monetary policy today, the RBI employs various tools such as repo rate, reverse repo rate, cash reserve rate. There are many things that there are many determinants of the monetary policy to manage liquidity and inflation. The monetary policy framework now focuses on maintaining price stability while supporting economic growth. So this is what is the post-independent scenario. This is the recent development. Inflation targeting. In 2016, the RBI adopted an inflation targeting framework with a formal target of 4% inflation, allowing for a tolerance band of plus or minus 2%. This marks a significant shift towards prioritizing price stability. Because if the inflation is too high or too low, it affects the volume of the currency in the country, and it has a bad implication if the inflation is too high. So the inflation has to be maintained at certain level. Otherwise, there can be hyperinflation or there can be deflation in the economy also. So inflation has to be maintained at certain level. Now we have a new challenge in terms of the digital payments and currency. In recent years, India has witnessed a surge in digital payment systems and discussions around digital currencies, including the introduction of central bank digital currency, CBDC, by the RBI. So overall, now this is the current situation of the India's monetary system has transformed from a commodity-based system to a modern framework that integrates various instruments and policies to manage the economy effectively. So that is the current situation. And this is what Babasaheb Ambedkar has always thought, that the management of the money should be given to the independent agency, because they can then manage the money without resorting to any bipartisan interest of the political parties or any influence. So he always advocated for the independent monetary authorities, which in India is the Reserve Bank of India. And that's what we need even today: more independent RBI, self-reliant monetary authority, importance of freeing currency regulation from colonial influence. That's very important, and from all other influences, so that the currency should be strong in terms of the domestic economy. And what is of essence is the growth in the domestic economy, which makes the currency stronger, isn't it? If the economy is downside, is sliding down, the rupee slides down, and not so many forces are there to tackle with, to understand how the money market works. So the ultimate goal is to serve the national economic needs. So I thought I will end this with a very interesting slide on speculation, foreign exchange, and social injustice. So as we know that Babasaheb Ambedkar will go for the value of the rupee, not the speculative value of it. And I think that's a very important point, because today the whole market, international market, has ended up becoming totally financialized. It's called the financialization, and everything is measured in terms of the money value or rupee value or dollar value, whatever that is. And making everything, commodifying everything or measuring everything in terms of the money itself has become a big issue. So there are two issues about the speculation, because if the stability of value is not maintained, Babasaheb Ambedkar says, he talks about the stability of the value, not the value which is inflated or created by the speculative forces, like the what happens in the stock market. Same thing happens in the money market. And Babasaheb Ambedkar will be very wary of the speculative aspect of it. It will, of course, allow the exchanges to operate, because he was for the commodity exchange, particularly agriculture commodity exchange. He won't have any problem with the stock exchange as such, but he would have the regulations in place, so that the excessive speculation will not hamper the general masses. And this is a very prophetic statement of Babasaheb Ambedkar. Without stability of value, money is a fraud. A very big statement. It's a very big statement. And he says the progress of trade depends upon the stability. Stabilizing the exchange is essential. Changes in the measure of value affects the stability. Because if we do not measure the value, and if the changes and change, we use a different standard to measure something. Like what is happening, you change the base year. Now in the recent government has been changing the base year so that showing how the economy is growing. And sometimes the change in the base year or the way you measure certain things affects the value, affects the stability. So somebody says be wary of how you measure certain things. Bounty for the sum and penalty for the wage earners due to fall in exchange, isn't it? So, there are many, many ways. The threefold classification of investing class, business class, and earning classes or the wage earners. How the same thing affects different people differently because of the money contract, isn't it? And the money sometimes, increases, sometimes decreases, and how that affects the general masses. And this is a very prophetic statement of Babasaheb Ambedkar. From the point of view of distribution of wealth, the standard which changes in its value and which becomes the via media of transferring wealth from the relatively poor to the relatively rich. You see, when there is a huge speculation, a lot of people lose their money, and it get pocketed by the very rich people, and money flows from the very poor to the relatively rich people. And Baba Ambedkar will be very wary of having such kind of a speculative system in the place. I find it very interesting as to how Baba Ambedkar connects this with the social injustice. And with this note, I will end my presentation. And as you can begin to see how deeply involved Baba Ambedkar is, how deeply he goes into everything and anything. And young Baba Ambedkar, presenting before the Hilton Young Commission, he in 1925, and he's very young, 24 years old, 34 years old, 25 plus 9, 34 years old Baba Ambedkar, very young, very well trained, very wise, very responsible person. At the age of 34, he is, you know, trying to educate the Indians about, this great field of monetary economics. And I can vouchsafe here very firmly that anyone who engages with Baba Sahib Ambedkar thoughts, particularly about the rupee, and they will have so much of a learning. And that learning is so essential and important today that our lives directly or indirectly are governed by what happens in the money market, governed by the inflation, governed by how the government manages what is called the deficit financing, and on so many things. So monopoly, for example, speculation in the market, the financialization and the marketization of everything, and various instruments which are financial instruments which are being produced, um, the packing and repacking of the debts, and so many things. Very interesting ideas there. So what I thought is to give you a kind of glimpse into the thinking of Baba Ambedkar and his very important principles, which can give a stability to the currency or rupee in case of a country, and how that can be done is definitely all the time through the purchasing power, making the economy stronger and stronger, industrialization wherever there is a possible, education. We're going to look into all these beautiful concepts in the coming sessions as to how Baba Ambedkar, his ideas of development, his ideology of economics, and his theories of economics. So I would stop here today and open up the session for any comments or anything that anybody would like to share.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening. Hello, AK.
I think Babasaheb and Marx haven't witnessed these digital societies. I
Yes.
mean, most of the transactions now are happening in digital format.
Hmm.
Uh, when majority of the population not accessible digital application, digital world.
Hmm.
So they're in point of view like they are getting excluded from the world of transaction.
Right, right.
So what would have been their imagination to to resolve this issue? Because it is not about the accessibility only; it is also about the capacity to understand these transactions. And without literacy, how these people will able to understand this world of digital transaction, digital economics, or digital
Hmm.
uh, point of view on this? Thank you, sir.
Yeah, I have no definite opinion on this, but as I would go to the basic definition of what constitute the money. It's a medium of exchange. So in the beginning, it was the metal, and because it was based on the metal, the monetary system was very developed, very different. Then it came to paper currencies, and it was backed by the several sort of the commodity market and the indices of certain commodities that determine the value of the money or the currency. And as we went further, there are even the commodity is not the basis of determining the worth of the money. So there are many other factors which determine the worth of the money. And the field has become so complicated and so abstract. It's very difficult to know what is exactly happening there for the common man. So you're right in terms of the knowledge of the common man as to what is money really. And there is if you look at the RBI's definition of the money, like M1, M2, M3, whatever. And I don't want to go into that, but when it comes to digital currency, it's basically currency is a medium of exchange, and I do not see anything wrong there if the numbers become the medium of exchanges, like what happens in the cryptocurrencies. And so, of course, the knowledge is very important, and that's why we are now resorting to this Ambedkar economics, so that we create a culture in the community which looks into these matters very seriously, as Babasaheb Ambedkar looked into. And I think I'm sure there are some good papers now available of showing how the digitization of the currency affects the people, like how it affects the African masses. Now everything, I hardly carry cash these days. I only carry the mobile sometimes, and it works. But whatever that is, there something is exchanged. Something is exchanged. Something, the debit and credit side of the thing is always there. It's going to be there all the time. So there is a if there is a loss somewhere, there will be gain somewhere. So I think the fundamental concepts remains the same. The the what is called the machinization of money. If the money or algorithm starts coming into play in this or in whatever field, I think we have to be very wary in terms of how ethical systems we can evolve to control the vagaries of the technologies, right? So I do not have AK bhai definite answer for that, but I think it's a very interesting question that you have raised, and we all need to think very seriously about it, right, AK bhai?
I mean, I mean,
Yeah, you can comment.
I just want to understand.
Hmm.
Yeah. I mean, I just want to understand
Hmm.
if these algorithms are deciding the definition of today's transaction.
Yeah,
We don't have I mean, we have hardly have any stake in designing or devising those algorithms.
right,
Our
right,
society are now participating in digital transaction quite oftenly.
right,
So
right.
that could have been one of the lagging
Definitely,
behind kind of
definitely,
situation.
definitely, definitely. Well, it depends on who writes the algorithms, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So you're right. You're right. So anyone has anything to say?
Thank you for very much, sir, Dr. Saab, for this profound and very insightful lecture. One question is there, means one word appears in your second or third slide,
Okay.
that invisible hand.
Yeah. Yeah.
Adam Smith's version is this
Yeah.
invisible hand, and it's working just like as a gravity in the economics.
Mhm.
And do we have any study of that? Means how India in Indian scenario this invisible hand was working?
Actually, he put the invisible hand in a very positive sense. He says that the prices will stabilize depending on the demand and supply. And invisible hand means no central regulator is there who is controlling how the price is stabilized. But we know for sure that sometimes the invisible hand doesn't work, because when there is a monopoly, the prices are determined by the monopolists. And if there are a few players in the market, they can come together and form the cartel and, dictate the prices. So you see, sometimes the invisible hand doesn't work, but generally his concept was that the self-interest works. And he has shown with a lot of example in this classic book, Wealth of Nation, which I think we should read. And I'm sure Babasaheb Ambedkar has read many times. So, the invisible hand, is a concept, is about, how the prices are stabilized without any central authority. So that was his main sort of a thesis. But we are going to look into that. There is an invisible hand, and how the prices are, regulated and stabilized, and what is the role of the government, what is the role of the private sector, where the market fails, where the government fails. So we'll be looking at that in the upcoming sessions. I just put it to show Babasaheb's definition as to how he defined the currency market in terms of, the need of exchange between the people, so that they can create the specialized products. So that was why I put it up there.
Yeah, thank you, Doctor. In this sense, we can smell that this invisible hand has given a means very deep dent to our people.
Mm.
Means in social scenario.
Right.
Thank you, Doctor.
Anyone else? See, I think
I
what
have one question.
yes, Abhilash.
Uh, when Baba Sahib was writing, after that, this liberalization and globalization happened. So I want to know, like, was he in favor of LPG reforms, or did he had any prediction about it?
Right. You see, this when Babasaheb Ambedkar was alive, that time these Bretton twins had already arrived on the surface. Though they were in a small sort of, in a way there is a history of this, what is called the globalization and liberalization. The world was globalized as such even before. And the IMF and the World Bank came after what is known as the Marshall's Plan after the World War II or one. So Babasaheb Ambedkar was aware of these institutions which were emerging, and I'm sure that Babasaheb Ambedkar would favor any framework which will further the international trade. Because he's talking about the concept of the competitive commodities. And in the international trade, the term is competitive advantage. So if any country has to develop, there has to be this, understand the principle of a competitive advantage, that a country is, has an advantage to produce something. For example, if Americans produce the shirts, and it will cost them $50 to produce a shirt, and in that $50 they can build something of a high value, there is no point for them to, produce the shirts. They will import it from, say, Bangladesh, if it produces the shirt, say, with $20. So it's a comparative advantage. It can be calculated, with the matrices. So I'm sure that Babasaheb Ambedkar would be definitely in favor of the international framework. He was a strong internationalist, but he would be very wary of the vagaries of these institutional frameworks, which are needed, of course. But also his emphasis will be, as we have seen, on the purchasing power, right? So he will always focus on how to build the economy of the country, how to build infrastructure, how to have the stable rupee, how to have the stable prices, how to have the social equity, how to have the, strong human development, without which you cannot have a strong economy in a country. So you see, Abhilash, as we speculate on this, we can see that, Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar will not reject the international frameworks. He will, of course, be a very hard negotiator if he sits across the international tables, as we see in the several of his testimonies, that he was a very accomplished negotiator, and he will negotiate on the behalf of India, so that, our country benefits. and he won't reject them outright, because these institutions are evolved through certain theories, and most of the theories or theoreticians of the time, for example, Alfred Marshall, Babasaheb Ambedkar wanted to meet him. He wrote to his senior guide that he put him in touch with Alfred Marshall when he was in England. So you see, he was familiar with all this, as we have seen in the previous session. He was familiar with a lot of these ideas, and like for example, ILO. He was in the favor of ILO. Babasaheb Ambedkar was in favor of ILO. His teacher in Columbia University was one of the founders of ILO. So he was an internationalist, but not at the cost of his own country.
But when we say like liberalization is good, so it is eating up jobs in some of the markets, which could have increased income of people.
Yes.
So like currently, current government have 100% FDI in many sectors. So
Yes. So
so
Babasaheb won't favor that. Babasaheb won't
okay.
favor that.
So only limited FDI is good, you are saying.
Limited FDI is good, and the sectors matter. Like some industries you shouldn't have FDI. For example, you cannot have FDI in a very sensitive industries, like say for example atomic energy, right? And there are certain sensitive industries which affect your domestic industries. So you have to guard your domestic industries, right? So you cannot
Yeah.
have FDI in all the sectors, like a blanket FDI for all. So it has to be regulated, and the government must work as a regulator, not like that's the role of the government to work as a regulator. So there are some sectors you can definitely have FDI, even maybe 100%. But there are sectors you cannot allow FDI.
Okay. In banking, was he favor of FDI? Like there are many international banks which are there, HSBC like
In
banks,
India,
and
yeah. In India, that
government
time
is
they were,
also privatizing some of the government banks.
yeah. That time there were international banks in India. HSBC was operating in India. There were Japanese Bank of Japan, which was operating in India. So there were international banks, and the framework was not very different from what is today, because there was this international banking system in India. And I think through the RBI it can be regulated as to how the banking can be done, because ultimately it's a very complex area. It's not an easy area. So if you we don't know what was Babasaheb's opinion to allow FDI in banking. We have no uh, writings of Babasaheb Ambedkar available to him. But as we know, we are going to see in certain industries, he wouldn't definitely allow FDI. For example, in insurance, he won't. Okay.
Okay. Thanks.
So should we
So
come?
one more question. One
Yes.
more question I have.
Yes, AK. Can you
Do you
identify
think?
yourself? Who are you? I'm just
Yeah, this is Anurup. Anurup is here. AK.
okay. Okay.
I asked previous question
Yeah.
about digital transaction.
AK doesn't signify. Know who
Do
you
you
are.
think? Yeah, sorry, sir. So my question is, do you think Ambedkar had given importance to state in economic transaction, whether it is local or domestic or international? I mean, these liberal policies are actually tampering the aspect of state,
Yes.
and most of these capitalist forces are becoming more powerful. So, in neoliberal context, do you think Ambedkar would have advocated for importance of state regulation, all
Yes.
this um, globalization and all? Yeah.
Yes. Definitely. I think Babasaheb Ambedkar can be termed as, he would of course promote the individual industries, and his response will be different on the different scales. But he was a state socialist, and he definitely knew the role of the state to intervene in the market, and it is now proved that without the state regulation, no economy can flourish. The state regulation is the vital part of the development of the economy. So I don't remember the name of an economist who has won the Nobel Prize, showing how the regulation of the government are key to the development of economics. So it's now very much proved that the regulation is very important. So the government is, there has to be a mechanism to regulate the economy, if not control it, but regulate. Like, the inflation rate, the employment rates, and there are so many factors which has to be regulated, which can never be regulated by a private authority, right? So you cannot plan for the entire agriculture by giving it to the private hands. Can we? No. So you need, state intervention, and Babasaheb Ambedkar had suggested state intervention in the agriculture. And because, the landlordism of the time came into opposition, and if the state socialism was there, and it came into practice in America, New Deal is all about that. The what happened in Britain after the World War II is all about that, making the country welfare state, having more role to the government. Then we know that the reaction from the rightists and so on and so forth. It happened in America as well. It happened in India. So I think the state socialism is a key. State as a regulator, you cannot do away with the state as a regulator. There has to be a regulation. There has to be a regulator. Otherwise, how you control the monopoly if we do not have the monopolistic laws? Right?
Yes, sir. Thank you. Thank you.
Anyone? Or should we conclude our session today?
Thank you, sir.
So we'll continue our exploration in the fourth session, which is about Babasaheb Ambedkar and welfare economics or developmental economics, and it another interesting sort of session that we will have. So thank you so much for all of you joining today, and see you in the next class. Till then, goodbye. Jai Bhim, Namo Buddhaya.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, please.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.